In the last lesson, we looked at functions being able to return values. And now we're just going to add a little bit more onto that, where we will have conditional returns. That means that the function will return different things based on different conditions. So here is a program that you can see. The function that is inside the program is called MaxValue. And what it does is, you can see right here, it says it returns the largest of two values. So two values are passed to this function MaxValue. And it says if x is bigger than y, if the first number that's passed is bigger than the second number, then send back the first number. Otherwise, send back the second number, because that must mean that the second numbers must be bigger than the first. And how are we calling this function? Right here. First, we're going to be asking the user for two numbers, and then we are going to call MaxValue and send those two numbers to it. And what's going to come back is the larger of the two. That will be stored in this variable called larger, and then we're going to print that number to the screen. So if I run it, it says enter a number, let's say 11, enter another number, 25. We'll say 25 is larger. If I run it one more time, enter a number, -3, enter another number, -100. -3 is larger than -100. Here's a second example, and what we've got is a function called AbsoluteValue. Now, if you haven't done anything with that in math before, AbsoluteValue just means it's sort of like a distance. What's the distance from 0? So in other words, a -5 has a distance of 5 from 0, just like a +5 has a distance of 5 from 0. Okay, so what it does is this function, if the value that's passed to it is positive, then it returns that number back. If the value that's passed to it is negative, then it sends back the negative of that value. In other words, it changes it to a positive. So we're going to get a number from the user, and then we're going to set that number using the AbsoluteValue function. And then we're going to print it to the screen. So when I run this, it says enter a number. If I enter a 6, it should just print out a 6. Okay, because AbsoluteValue, we're sending a 6 up here. X is 6. X is bigger than 0, so it's just sending the number back. But if I run it again and I enter a -25, for example, it will print out a +25. Why? Because AbsoluteValue, when we call it with a -25 in here, is x bigger than 0? No, -25 is not bigger than 0. That means it falls under else, and we are going to return -x. Well, what's -25? That's +25. So we're returning a +25. Any negative values that we pass to this function come back positive, and any positive values that we pass to this function just come back unchanged. Okay, here's one last example of a conditional return, but using Pygame. You can see right here we're getting our mouse position, and this code right here says if check inside xy radius mouse position 0 mouse position 1. Remember, this is the x coordinate of the cursor and this is the y coordinate of the cursor. And so this check inside, what is it doing? Well, if we look at the function, it checks and see if the cursor has clicked on a circle. That's technically not true. Is inside a circle. So definition of check inside, it passes the circle's x value, the circle's y value, and the circle's radius. And then it also passes an x and y position. It could be the cursor, it could be another circle, it could be several different things. And then what it does is it calculates the distance between these two coordinates. So it calculates the distance from the circle center to whatever x and y happen to be. In our case, it's the mouse's x and y. And then it says if the distance is less than CR, CR right here being the circle's radius, if the distance is less than the circle's radius, it must mean that whatever is passing these coordinates must be inside the circle. Okay, so if the distance is less, then return true. Otherwise, return false. It means it must not be inside. So if it returns true, it means that the x and y here is located inside the circle with this radius. And so it sends back true. And so it says if check inside. So if this is true, then draw this background. Otherwise, draw this background. Remember RGB. So draw a green background if it's inside the circle, and draw a red background if it's outside the circle. And here is the circle that we're drawing right here. And remember, draw background is our function right here. and all it does is it fills the window, but now it's being passed a color, and the color that's being passed is right here. So if I run this, you can see that the screen is red, the background is red until my cursor comes inside the circle. Once it's inside the circle, the background turns green, and then back outside it's red. And you could use this very well as like a button then, right? So the button itself, the circle could be drawn red until you put your mouse over it, and then it's drawn green. Okay, so that's just another way of using a conditional return, but just using it in Pygame. And remember, you are just limited by your creativity. This is maybe a little bit of a silly example, but there's tons and tons of stuff that you can do using your own creativity and this kind of code.